Hello and welcome. Today we will be discussing two important learning theories. The first is known as cognitive load theory, and the second is known as the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. In cognitive load theory, it recognizes that while the long-term memory is extremely vast, the working or short-term memory is in fact very limited and can only process about 7 pieces of information at a time, and even lower if the material is complex and is about 2 to 4 pieces of information at a time. With that in mind, there are 3 very important factors to keep in mind with cognitive load theory. Those are intrinsic cognitive load, extraneous cognitive load, and germane cognitive load. Intrinsic cognitive load refers to the essential information. So this is what the learner really needs to know and the really relevant points of whatever they're trying to learn. This information is going to be complex in nature because it is new, and the more elements that interact with each other, the more complex this becomes. And this is really important because this is what the learner needs to focus on in order to learn something new, to take in that knowledge, process it in their existing schemas, and actually encode it into the memory so that it can be applied when needed. Extraneous cognitive load is everything else that is not essential or part of intrinsic cognitive load. So this would be all of the distractors and really everything that takes away from the learner's ability to focus on the essential information that is part of the intrinsic cognitive load. Germane cognitive load is in fact additive between the two. So if you take the intrinsic cognitive load, all of that essential information, and subtract all the extraneous information or load that puts on the mind, you're left with the germane cognitive load, the difference between the essential and the non-essential. So as instructional designers and educators, it is really, really important to keep these factors in mind when designing material. You want to make sure that you're managing the intrinsic cognitive load, so managing what your learners can take in and commit to memory that's new, relevant information, and removing all of the extraneous things, all of the things that are not essential to that learner's ability to learn new things and commit new information to their memory. The cognitive theory of multimedia learning first focuses on multimedia, which is just the combination of pictures and words to learn something new. Cognitive theory of multimedia learning also recognizes that a learner has 2 channels with which they can take in new information, and those are visual and auditory. So any combination of pictures, words, or material that could be taken in with the eyes and the ears would be considered multimedia. It doesn't necessarily have to be something high-tech. Even a diagram that has pictures and words is considered multimedia. The cognitive theory of multimedia learning and cognitive load theory are very closely related because they both really recognize that the working memory is so limited. The cognitive theory of multimedia learning adds on to it a little bit by saying that the working memory can process information through the visual channel and the auditory channel, but it still is very important not to overload either channel. So again, you're still managing that intrinsic load in an auditory and visual way, as well as trying to get rid of everything that's not essential. So still really trying to minimize that extraneous load in a visual and auditory way. And that is how the 2 theories are related and how instructional designers and educators should really keep these theories in mind when they're designing material and presenting things to learners. They need to make sure that they focus on the essential and remove all of the extra stuff. And also keeping in mind that your learners are going to learn better when they can process information visually and auditory. So you want to make sure that you have those 2 components, but not anything extra. Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope this information is beneficial in your classroom.